Welcome back to Gods and Heroes Unveiled, where we unravel the epic tales of ancient Greece. Today, we're staring into the mythological bestiary at Medusa, Stheno, and Euryale, the Gorgons, three sisters with snakes for hair and a gaze that turns men to stone. From their eerie origins to their deadly deeds and haunting legacy, these creatures are as fascinating as they are terrifying. Ready to face them without blinking? Then stick around, hit that subscribe button, and let's dive into their petrifying story together. Medusa, Stheno and Euryale, the Gorgons, Mythological Bestiary. 1. The birth of the Gorgons. The Gorgons, Medusa, Stheno, and Euryale, slither into Greek mythology as a trio born from the sea's darkest depths, a blend of beauty and horror that defies the imagination. Unlike the Chimera or Cerberus, spawned by Typhon and Echidna, the Gorgons trace their lineage to older, more primal forces, Phorcys and Ceto, ancient sea deities whose brood embodied the ocean's untamed chaos. Phorcys, the old man of the sea, and Ceto, a monstrous goddess of marine dangers, birthed a host of terrors. Think the sea serpent Scylla or the whirlpool Charybdis, but the Gorgons stood out as their most infamous offspring. Picture them, three sisters, each with writhing snakes for hair, their hissing locks a living crown of venom. Their faces, once said to be beautiful, twisted into grotesque masks, tusked like boars, with golden wings sprouting from their backs and claws of bronze for hands. Their eyes, though, were the true horror, a stare that petrified anyone foolish enough to meet it, turning flesh to stone in an instant. Hesiod, in his Theogony, calls them dreadful and grim. Born to inspire fear, their very existence a curse on the world. But their births tell different tales. Stheno and Euryale, the elder sisters, were immortal, crafted as eternal beings by their divine parents. Their names hint at their nature. Stheno, meaning strength, was the fiercest, a relentless predator. Euryale, wide-leaping, roamed far and wailed with a banshee's cry when her sister fell. Medusa, though, was mortal, unique among the trio, and her origin carries a twist. Some say she was born a Gorgon, like her sisters, a natural terror of the sea. Others, like Ovid in his Metamorphoses, spin a tragic tale. Medusa was once a stunning maiden, her beauty catching Poseidon's eye. When he ravished her in Athena's temple, the goddess, enraged, cursed Medusa, transforming her golden locks into snakes and her gaze into death. This split origin shapes their myth. If Medusa was cursed, her sisters might have been her kin by birth, altered alongside her, or loyal companions who shared her fate. Either way, their seaborne roots tie them to Phorcys' watery domain, perhaps a cave near the western edge of the world, where the sun dips into the ocean. Some link them to the Gorgades, mythical islands beyond the Pillars of Hercules, a realm of isolation fit for such outcasts. Their monstrous forms, part woman, part beast, echo the sea's dual nature, alluring yet deadly, a siren's song turned to stone. Their birth carries symbolic weight. The Greeks saw the sea as a source of life and danger, and the Gorgons embodied its wild extremes. Snakes, symbols of death and rebirth, crowned their heads, while their wings hinted at freedom no mortal could grasp. Medusa's mortality made her a target, a flaw her sisters lacked, setting her apart as both victim and villain. Scholars debate their roots. Were they echoes of older goddesses, like the snake-haired Erinyes, or a warning against feminine power unchecked? Their tusks and claws suggest a blend of human and animal, a chaos the Greeks feared in nature and themselves. The Gorgons' creation wasn't random. Phorcys and Ceto birthed them as guardians or curses, their gaze a weapon no army could withstand. Unlike Cerberus, tied to a post, or the Chimera, roaming free, the Gorgons lived apart, exiled to a desolate edge of the world, perhaps a punishment, perhaps a choice. Medusa's tale, especially flips the script, a beauty turned monster, her birth a pivot from innocence to dread. As we'll see next, their reign wasn't quiet. They turned their isolation into a battlefield, their stairs a graveyard of stone. 2. The Gorgons' reign of terror. The Gorgons didn't hide in their sea-swept exile. They ruled it with a terror that turned trespassers to statues and their names to whispers of dread. Medusa, Stheno, and Euryale lived far from mortal lands, perhaps on an island shrouded in mist or a cave carved into cliffs. But their isolation didn't dull their menace. Their petrifying gaze made them untouchable, a defense and a weapon that carved a graveyard of stone across their domain. For the Greeks, they were the ultimate outcasts, beings whose very sight was death. Stheno and Euryale, immortal and fierce, roamed their territory like predators. Stheno, the strongest, was said to have killed more men than her sisters combined, her bronze claws rending flesh when her stare wasn't enough. Euryale, with her far-reaching wail, struck fear into sailors who drifted too close, her cry a harbinger of doom. Their golden wings let them swoop from crags or cliffs, ambushing intruders with a speed that matched their savagery. Together, they were a duo of eternal wrath, guarding their realm with a ferocity that few dared challenge. Medusa, though mortal, was the most infamous. Her gaze alone could stop a heart, literally turning warriors, explorers, and fools into lifeless rock. Myths paint her lair as a macabre gallery, stone figures frozen mid-scream, swords raised, eyes wide with terror. Unlike her sisters, Medusa's mortality made her a target, drawing heroes to her doom. Her snakes hissed warnings, her tusked face snarled defiance, but her fate was sealed by her curse. She didn't seek victims. They came to her, driven by glory or greed, only to join her silent army. Their reign wasn't just physical. It was mythic. The Gorgons embodied isolation's wrath, a warning to those who strayed too far from civilization. Sailors told tales of islands where the wind carried hisses and wails, where a single glance spelled death. No armies marched against them. Their power was too absolute, their exile too remote. The Greeks saw them as a dark mirror, beauty twisted, strength unbound, a feminine force turned monstrous. Their terror wasn't chaos like the chimeras. It was a cold, deliberate punishment. Then came Perseus, the hero who broke their reign. Tasked by King Polydectes to slay Medusa, he armed himself with divine gifts: Hermes' winged sandals, Hades' helm of invisibility, and Athena's mirrored shield. Guided by the Graeae, 3 hags who shared an eye, he found the Gorgons asleep in their lair. Stheno and Euryale slumbered, their snakes limp, but Medusa was his mark. Using the shield to avoid her gaze, Perseus struck, severing her head with a sickle from Hermes. Her sisters awoke, shrieking, but he vanished under the helm, Medusa's head in hand, a trophy dripping blood that birthed Pegasus and Chrysaor. The aftermath was chaos. Stheno and Euryale's wails shook the cliffs, their grief a storm no mortal could face. Immortal, they couldn't die, but Medusa's loss shattered their trio. Perseus fled, her head a weapon he'd wield against foes like the sea monster Cetus. The Gorgons' terror didn't end. Stheno and Euryale lingered, their rage eternal. But Medusa's death marked a turning point. Her vulnerability, her mortality, made her the weak link, a crack that heroism exploited. Their reign left scars beyond stone. The Greeks wove it into their fears, of the unknown, of women scorned, of boundaries crossed. Art captured the moment. Vases show Perseus mid-strike, Medusa's head lolling, her sisters lunging in vain. It's a tale of triumph, but also tragedy. Medusa, cursed and killed, her sisters left to mourn. Their terror wasn't mindless. It was a fortress, a legacy of dread that lingered in every statue left behind, a testament to their power even in defeat. 3. The legacy of the Gorgons. The Gorgons didn't fade when Medusa's head rolled. They slithered into eternity, their legacy a blend of horror and fascination that echoes through time. Medusa, Stheno, and Euryale left more than a trail of statues. They carved their image into art, culture, and the human mind, evolving from sea-born terrors to symbols of power, fear, and defiance. Their story, split between Medusa's demise and her sister's immortality, resonates far beyond their myth. In ancient Greece, the Gorgons were everywhere. Medusa's severed head, the Gorgonian, became a talisman, carved on shields, coins, and temple doors to ward off evil. Her wide eyes and snarling snakes stared from Athenian armor, a promise of protection through terror. Stheno and Euryale, less depicted, lingered in tales as Medusa's vengeful kin, their wails a ghostly chorus. Pottery captured Perseus' strike, Medusa's head dripping, her sisters in pursuit. A scene replayed across centuries, proof of their grip on the Greek imagination. Their legacy wasn't just visual, it was linguistic and symbolic. Gorgon became shorthand for anything fearsome or repellent, a word rooted in gorgos, meaning dreadful. Medusa's gaze inspired the verb to mesmerize, a twist from petrifying to captivating, showing her shift from monster to muse. The Greeks saw them as apotropaic, evil to fight evil, their ugliness a shield against worse fates. Temples like the Artemis Sanctuary at Corfu bore Gorgon friezes, Medusa's face a guardian at the gates. The Romans inherited this obsession. Ovid's Metamorphoses gave Medusa her tragic backstory, casting her as a victim of divine spite, a shift that softened her terror into pathos. Roman mosaics and sarcophagi showed her head, often winged, a symbol of death's inevitability. Stheno and Euryale faded, but Medusa's image thrived, her snakes a shorthand for the untamed. As Christianity rose, she morphed into a devilish figure, her gaze a sin to avoid, yet her protective power lingered in amulets. The Renaissance revived her with flair. Artists like Caravaggio painted her severed head, blood spurting, eyes still glaring, a masterpiece of horror and beauty. Cellini's bronze Perseus hoisted her aloft, a triumph in metal. Stheno and Euryale stayed shadows, but Medusa became a star, her duality, beauty turned beast, a magnet for painters and poets. Shelley saw her as a tortured soul, her snakes lovely in their anguish, flipping her myth into art. In modern times, the Gorgons, mostly Medusa, thrive. Science nods to them. The Gorgonian corals mimic their snaky forms, while psychology ties them to fear of the feminine. Pop culture loves her. Medusa slithers through films like Clash of the Titans, games like God of War, and books like Riordan's Percy Jackson series. Her head graces Versace's logo, a nod to her allure and danger. Stheno and Euryale get less spotlight, but their sister's fame keeps the Gorgon name alive. Medusa's legacy splits her from her kin. She's a feminist icon now, her curse a metaphor for victim blaming, her gaze a reclaiming of power. Yet she's still a monster, a Halloween mask, a shorthand for dread. Stheno and Euryale, immortal but obscure, linger as echoes, fierce but forgotten beside Medusa's severed fame. Together, they're a paradox, terror and tragedy, repulsion and reverence. Their mark isn't just in stories, it's in us. The Gorgons tap our fear of the other, the outcast, the untouchable. Medusa's head, once a weapon, now stares from museum walls, her sister's wails a whisper in the wind. From Greek caves to modern screens, they endure, a trio born of the sea, bound by a curse, and immortalized by the eyes they turned to stone. Outro. That's the chilling saga of Medusa, Stheno, and Euryale, from their sea-born terror to their stony reign and timeless legacy. Which Gorgon haunts you most? Let us know in the comments. If you enjoyed this dive into the mythological bestiary, smash that like button, subscribe, and ring the bell for more Greek legends. Thanks for watching Gods and Heroes Unveiled. See you next week for another epic tale.